All right, so good afternoon to everybody, if I didn't say that already, and thank you for having me here. And the topic of my presentation is social ecological explorations into conservation of agricultural biodiversity. And without further ado, I will just go on with this. All right, let's get on. So my work has focused on conservation of so-called traditional rural biotopes, or TRBs for short. It's a complicated concept to pronounce, so I always use TRBs. And these habitats, which you see in the photographs here, are the biodiversity hotspots of agricultural landscapes here in Finland. And this applies not only in terms of species richness, but also to the high heterogeneity among the habitat types. And this biodiversity is supported by low intensity management, which typically is either grazing or mowing, and it has its roots in centuries old farming practices. And there are many different types of TRBs, ranging from dry meadows to wood pastures, and often they are referred to as semi-natural grasslands, semi-natural habitats, or high nature value habitats. And I myself have used the term traditional rural biotope because it has a direct link to Finnish nature conservation, and it nicely includes both the wooded habitats and the open habitats. So to put it short, TRBs are semi-natural farmland habitats formed and maintained through traditional agricultural activities, such as grazing and mowing, that support high biodiversity. And TRBs have become extremely rare in Finland and also elsewhere in Europe, mostly due to agricultural modernization during the 20th century. And in Finland, also forestry practices play a significant role in the process. And a general trend has been the abandonment of traditional management practices, which has led either to overgrowing of the TRB sites or a land use conversion into arable land or commercial forests. And due to this loss of habitat, many species that are specialized in TRBs have become threatened. And conservation of TRBs has actually been mentioned as one of the most difficult issues in nature conservation in Finland. And although the original motivations for my research were very much ecologically oriented, it soon became clear that I should adopt a social sciences perspective as well. So there is this hot potato, and I took hold on that. And when I started my PhD project, that was back in year 2013, I started to conceptualize this hot potato study subject like this. I started with acknowledging the importance of history and cultural heritage perspectives, as TRBs are and were tied to old-fashioned agricultural land use practices for centuries. And mowing, extensive grazing, and pollarding, which is collecting of branches for animals to feed during wintertime, all these practices created landscapes that are complex in both their structures and functions. And the key unit of these landscapes were small family farms that practiced subsistence farming. And also other values besides the cultural history and tradition are important in the TRB context. And these more modern valuations include biodiversity, which I already mentioned, but also ecosystem services. These are various and range from food production to landscape aesthetics. And then the underlying factor in all TRB conservation is the ecological crisis caused by agricultural modernization during the 20th century. So in Finland, we have less than 1% of TRBs left when compared to the situation during the 19th century. And all TRB habitats are threatened, and of all red-listed species in Finland, 22% are tied to TRB habitats. And the situation is even worse because the remaining TRB sites often are very poor in their habitat quality as a result of insufficient management. And then we do have certain actions or tools that can be undertaken in order to ease the situation. TRB management is funded through agri-environment schemes, and EU projects have launched several restoration and management planning initiatives. And both of these tools, the AESCs and the EU projects, are seen as highly bureaucratic, which actually does not increase their appeal that much, as you can guess. And then on the more flexible side, we have management consultation that is targeted mainly at farmers. And more recently, more attention has been paid to the fact that the management effort should be targeted to sites with highest biological value. And this management prioritization in space needs both national and regional level emphasis. All right, so when I started doing my work, one of the key questions in my mind concerned the motivations underlying TRB management and management abandonment. And management is necessary for TRB sustenance, yet there was surprisingly little information available on the social ecological factors contributing to it. So I took a case study approach and I conducted landowner interviews in relation to 14 TRB sites located here in central Finland. And in addition to semi-structured interviews, I also did a so-called Q analysis, which was based on 60 general TRB related statements that were sorted by the interviewees according to the agreement or disagreement with each statement. And then the interview data underwent a content analysis and a factor analysis was done on the statement sortings. And the content analysis focused on more personal level perceptions, whereas the Q analysis revealed discourses that were shared among the participants. And then I will jump directly to the main conclusions of this case study. So first of all, the participants or the landowners perceived TRBs as nexuses of values related to biodiversity, landscape, and living cultural heritage. So many aspects were there. And they understood that TRB management is mainly funded through agri-environmental schemes, and they really appreciated these resources, but they also pointed out that these agri-environmental policies do not recognize the multifacetedness of TRB management, but instead oversimplify TRB management into an external practice to what is seen as regular farming. So although the policies aim to safeguard TRB-related biodiversity, in reality, the policies tend to marginalize TRB management. And this, together with the ongoing agricultural industrialization, makes TRBs detached from their earlier agricultural function. And this loss of function makes TRBs vulnerable to management abandonment. However, there were also those landowners that had been really successful in tying TRB management into their livelihood and farming business. And these so-called TRB entrepreneurs were able to utilize TRB grazing as part of everyday and year-round farming. One example of this was combining cattle husbandry with rural tourism, thus making use of the appealing traditional landscape maintained by TRB grazing. And then another positive finding was that there were synergies among the positive experiences and observed ecological benefits of TRB management, which together motivated further management. So there was evidence for a virtuous or self-reinforcing cycle of management action. And if future policies could support this sort of systemic feedback, the effectivity of the agri-environmental policies could be increased. Okay, then my social ecological systems analysis actually fits quite nicely to the recent developments in TRB related research. So in a recent project that was led by Irina Herson, we reviewed research publications on high nature value semi-natural habitats in the Boreal Europe, and the results show how TRB related research has diversified both in terms of amount and topics. And the earliest accounts come from the 1970s, and in the 1990s, the research effort really intensified as EU policies started to encourage TRB management within the region. And the earliest studies were largely focused on ecology, and they often combined community ecological research questions with information on land use changes or management actions. And the social ecological research agenda then has been rising after the beginning of the 21st century, with ecosystem services popping out after the publication of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in year 2005. So it's not a big surprise that my own research interests have been following the same path. So I started with a keen interest in the community ecological impacts of TRB management and land use change, and then ended up getting excited about the cultural ecosystem services, values, and systems analysis. Then I defended my doctoral thesis in 2018, and Jörn kindly was my opponent. And here in the picture are also my supervisors, Elisabeth Baron and Panu Halme. And then after the happy graduate student years, I started my postdoc life with wondering, what should I do next? So I attended the Leverage Points conference, and I really must thank everyone involved. It was a very inspirational and well-organized meeting and hit me in a good moment. And among the many visualizations of the presentations, this one at the right-hand side spoke and still speaks to me. So while I have been trying to figure out who am I as a researcher, I have continued to sort of explore the outer borders of my comfort zone and tried to come up with new ways of studying TRB systems. And the latest experimentation has been combining arts-based methods with conservation-oriented topics. And I also took inspiration of the Leverage Points framework and utilized it in my recent work. So I won't go into details here, but wanted to show how I was able to structure the key factors of TRB conservation here in Finland into levers at different levels, starting from the shallow measurable targets and going into deep controversies among the goals of Finnish nature conservation and the values underlying those goals. And then, like methodologically, it was surprising how an art science project that started very small and with a clear focus on environmental education gave room for deeply analytical discussions on the value of TRBs, types of knowledges and ways of being human, and different ways to relate and connect to nature. And based on these discussions and self-reflective writings, we innovated 5 additional potential levers for more sustainable TRB management. And these levers target the deeper leverage points, which is crucial for getting the TRB conservation potato into a bit cooler stage. So first, we detected interactions among doing, learning, and motivation. This was parallel to the virtuous cycle of TRB management in principle. But now that we worked with 5th graders and did arts-based exercises, the importance of playing in nature, having fun, and sensing to nature was emphasized. Then, on the system design level, we observed 2 things. Firstly, the arts-based exercises that we did were very hands-on and included a lot of bodily engagement and simplified dance movement, and this allowed for development of a feeling and understanding of nestedness, where oneself sort of lost boundaries and first became part of the group of humans doing the same exercise, then the group connected to the non-human organisms such as farm animals present in the situation, and finally the whole bunch of living things sort of melted into the nature that was all around and inside of us. And this kind of an experiential connection with nature would have been impossible to achieve without the artistic practices. However, we concluded that the experience needs to be complemented with an informed cognitive component, that is knowledge about the value of nature and the surrounding ecosystem. And by bringing art and science together, this kind of synthesis of different knowledge types becomes possible. And then digging deeper to our case study, we then noticed how the whole project and the data we had collected resonated with the so-called ecosystem stewardship thinking by Chapin and colleagues. They define ecosystem stewardship as building on three key elements. Firstly, a motivation of action towards ecosystem resilience and human well-being. Secondly, an integration of ecological and social processes, and thirdly, an emphasis on future-oriented actions. And we concluded that promoting such a stewardship philosophy towards agricultural nature would benefit its conservation. And one outcome of the stewardship philosophy is a post-humanistic consideration on the rights and agency of non-human nature, which strongly questions the industrial farming practices and thus leads to critical evaluation of the dominant profit-oriented mindset of current agriculture here in Finland. Finally, after that handful, I want to show how this was an extremely fun and intensive project to work with, and the artistic value is best described through the beautiful visual documentation. And I know we don't have time to watch the videos now, but if you feel like it, you can perhaps check them out on a later moment. And now I want to thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions or receive comments. So thank you.